G'day, welcome to another live session. This morning for me, I thought we'd look about I thought we'd look at what makes good composition. What is a scene or a subject worth drawing? Because composition is really important. Composition is the thing that the in a sense, it's what people see. All of our technique, all of our skills, all of our creating of effects, all of our control of ink, of line, of hatching, all the things we do and we bring together to create what we see at the end, it all is seen through the framework of the composition. And so a poor composition can let our whole scene, all our effort, all the finesse, the skill of our technique down. So I've got 20 things to think about. We'll move through them quickly, but I've got 20 things to think about that in some way contribute to a great scene. And I'm not going to be um ironically, I'm going to be just listing them and talking about them for a couple of minutes each, um, rather than showing pictures, because I think it's really important to not just see the visual, but to have the thoughts, the concepts in our minds. So the first thing that makes great composition, and please, any questions about drawing you want to ask, use the chat. I'm happy to always, between points, answer whatever questions or respond to whatever thoughts you might have. But the first thing that I think is very helpful in composition is an extreme perspective. Now, an extreme perspective simply means one that's not the normal perspective. So normally we're kind of standing on ground level and looking things at that human height level, and that creates certain perspective angles. An extreme perspective is when we're either very close to something and or very high or very low or very skewed. So it may be on top of a tall building, almost looking down on top of a building. It may be lying on the ground, looking up very close to the corner of a wall or something similar to that. So these are the things I mean by extreme. In manga work, you often see very extreme angles, perspective angles with the figures. We're not just talking about buildings. And so there'll be someone who looks at, like, they're about knee level looking up at this dramatically posed figure, and it creates an unusual viewing point, and therefore what we see is familiar but not quite familiar, and so that grabs our attention. Sometimes what we're seeing is familiar enough that we kind of know what it is, but but we also see there's something very different about how we're seeing this familiar object, and so that makes us want to engage further and see, hang on, what is it? Or, wow, that looks interesting. And before we know it, we've been drawn into the scene and we're now starting to explore it. So the extreme perspective has been an entry point. And really, all of these compositional elements end up being an entry point for grabbing attention in some way. And some of these different compositional elements will grab some people's attention more than others. Some of them will almost unavoidably grab everyone's attention. And while I'm going through them one by one, a strong composition will invariably contain several of them. So that's an important thing to remember too. It's not which one, but but how many of these can be combined. And sometimes we'll have a scene that naturally combines a few, and we can introduce some of the other elements to it. In my thinking, most of the time, what we want a composition to do is to draw people in to it. G'day, Tay Day. Oh, I'm sorry you can't catch it, but yeah, maybe you can put the finished version on when you're washing up or something later in your day, or tomorrow for you. It's morning here for me. Um, so yeah, so composition draws us in and it keeps us in. It engages us there. it we I think good composition often moves us around the scene once it's grabbed our attention. So as I said at the start, we can have fantastic technique skills, but if what we've drawn doesn't firstly cause people to stop to look and then to stay and explore what we've drawn for some reason, then you know we haven't really finished the drawing if it's not one that wants to engage people. So extreme perspective, simply the surprise, and sometimes the angles draw us in. If we think of one point perspective, that can be, particularly if we're looking at it from very low down or very high up, that can be very extreme angles, and the angles themselves draw us to the center, like going to a bullseye of the drawing. So sometimes just the actual angles grab us and pull us into the scene. Other times, it's not quite so much like that, but the unfamiliarity does. Um, okay, so that's the first point. An extreme perspective can be a compelling, interesting um, compositional device. Second one is a very deep distance, sense of depths of plane in our scene. When a scene is very shallow, we kind of almost bounce off it, bounce back. There's not much to see. There's only the immediate things that we're looking at. But when our scene has feels, is drawn in such a way that a strong sense of depth is created, the effect of depth is created because, of course, with just a sheet of cardboard, there is no or paper, there is no real depth. But we create the illusion of depth by the way we've controlled our ink mark making technique, then that draws people in. That invites people to go from the closest objects past all the levels and the elements to the very furthest elements, which let's say it's a very faint mountaintop in the distance. Well, that compositional structure has then really drawn us in. And if the very closest thing feels very close, then that makes the journey that much longer. It feels that much longer. It takes that little bit longer. We're more involved. We more have a sense of this world that's being created. And and so creating the illusion of depth is, I think, a really, really strong technique. And it doesn't have to be a sort of a mountain vista or ocean cliff top scene, although they're great subjects to draw. But it could be a street scene where we go right along down the street and we feel, when we just stand here and look, that we can feel the distance that's in front of us stretching away. It may be a really cluttered living room, but there's so many elements, and the closest one is so close. I don't know, maybe it's a teacup on a little table right close. And then maybe the view goes along the lounge, the perspective angles draw us through, and perhaps there's a doorway, a large doorway, and we now can glimpse into the next room. And so now we wander into that next room visually and start to explore what's there. And maybe there's a doorway into another space that we can see, but we can't tell what that is. But maybe there's strong light coming through there. So these are all compositional elements to have us sort of, almost physically move through a long distance in our drawing, a long physical distance on this two-dimensional bit of paper. So there, yeah, yeah. So there's two very important compositional elements that really create a strong feel. G'day, Roberto. Thank you. Third one is just lots of detail. The problem with lots of detail now, if you know my work, I do love detail. I draw a lot of detail. If you know my Instagram work in particular, there's a lot of architectural detail in some of the interior scenes of grand palaces and the like, cathedrals and so forth. a lot of detail can work two ways. It can draw us in because there's so much to see, or it can actually become like an impenetrable shield that we can't go past. So we do need to be careful with detail. We don't want detail for detail's sake. We want to make sure it's working in the way that we want it to work. Now, we may be trying to create the effect of this wall of detail, and that's part of what we're trying to say, part of what we wanted. But if we want to draw people into the scene more, we have to be careful how we control the detail and how it fits into the overall scene. But detail in itself can really grab attention. And when we're looking at these compositional elements, it's about grabbing people's attention, maintaining attention so that our drawing can work in whatever way we want it to work, which is often simply and even unrecognized by us the way it worked for us. So the whatever elements in this composition that made us think, I love this scene, we want to capture those in our drawing, whether we've actually like been able to write them down in bullet point form what they are and tick them off or not. So that's that's how we're working this. So we have the extreme viewpoint, often extreme perspective angles. We have a really long, deep depth of planes happening, a big sense of foreground to distance where we actually invite people to walk into our scene. And then we have the detail that does need to be controlled carefully so it's not too overwhelming and people actually can't engage because there's no obvious place to start the engagement. But yeah, I do like detail myself. The fourth one is an invitation to a journey. So some of these strong compositional elements are more the subject itself, and some of them are more technical, sort of almost visual kind of what's the word? Um, um, Technical things that kind of without us realizing draw us in. But this one, an invitation to a journey, is actually a very obvious one, and it does come from what the subject is itself more than or primarily compared to the tweaking of some of the other things that we're going to go on to talk about in this list of 20 strong compositional elements. So by this, I simply mean a scene that's a street with a long street. Well, the very subject invites us to walk along the street. It may be a series of steps. It may be a staircase in a house, or it may be some steps in on a bush track. It may be a pathway on a bush track that goes around a corner. And while we can't see what's around the corner, there may be hints of it because of lighting or whatever. But it's the suggestion of come around here. And so we kind of do go as far as we can go. And then our imagination sometimes takes us into what the artist hasn't drawn, but has suggested. And we've gone on a journey and we continue it in our mind. Um, and those things are are very strong. I did a drawing that was based on a Paris photographer's photograph for Instagram, which I really liked, which was a father and son setting out on a what obviously was going to be a day's journey somewhere, doing something. They both had their backpacks on. And you knew, I suppose they could have been coming home, but their backpacks looked full. So it looked like the morning because the light was also very low in the sky. So they cast long shadows. And yeah, it wasn't so, I mean, they were walking along a laneway. It wasn't a big street or a big trail. And it was really like the sort of laneway that's just between houses. It wasn't like they were still, it looked like they'd really just left home. They might have just walked out of a doorway behind us. and they've just set off and they're all fresh and clean and they've got all their supplies and the sun's just rising and the whole day was ahead. I mean, there was a whole story here, and it was, yeah, a lot of interest, a lot of fun to be thinking about what's happening, what are they doing. And so that was also an invitation to a journey. The journey, though, was the sense of journey was created by the figures and the things that made it look like they were embarking on a day out. So compositionally, that was very strong, and it's still one of my probably favorite drawings that I've done because, yeah, you imagine yourself as the father or the son, and yeah, it really brings you in, and because it brings you in, you explore the whole scene on the paper. And so strong composition keeps eyes in the drawing, on the drawing, discovering what you've done, and in the best of drawings, going beyond what you've done because you've suggested more even than you've drawn. So that's a really strong, I think, compositional element, that invitation to a journey in some way, either from the figures obviously doing a journey, or from stairs or pathways, roads, anything that physically suggests come this way. Um, all right, the fifth thing that's a strong compositional element, and that's contrasting the forms and the marks and the surfaces that we're using in our scene. So, for instance, in a given scene, because I like drawing architecture a lot, I draw a lot of buildings, and they have often, well, nearly always very geometric shapes. And even when there's a lot of detail, there's still often a lot of wall, a lot of blank, smooth surface or relatively smooth surfaces. I think that compositionally contrasts really well with foliage, with trees, with grasses, with shrubs, because there you have very non-geometric forms and you have very different, you don't have the relatively smooth, straight edges for things. You've got very, even when it's hedged, it's not a smooth surface, and it catches the light in different ways. It creates all these different visual effects. And so I think that contrast is really interesting. And it's the sort of thing that I think does attract our attention, attracts our eyes, has us looking to see what's, um, oh, yeah, this is, and the combination between smoother, emptier spaces, which is, unless it's a palace or the, big building in Paris or something, um, is relatively simple compared to the detail that may be drawn and or suggested on the foliage and stuff. Um, so it gives us space to appreciate the detail, but the detail also highlights the planar areas. And so now we're bouncing back and forth because we can see both of these different types of areas and textures now really easily, and so it's easy to start seeing what's happening. It's easy. What we want to do with good composition is to make it easy to understand what people are looking at so they can start to engage with it, and difficult for them to leave once they've been pulled in. That there's just always more to see, more places to go, whether because it's the objects, it's the story, the line direction, quite literally, the perspective angles sort of draw us in a certain way. We take advantage of that and we strengthen that with other elements that we're going to talk about. Um, but yes, and it's not just contrast between sort of textures and things. It may be a combination of very small things and very large things, and that may be because the very large things are very close and the smaller things are further away. They may be the same item. And so here we have the second point, the depth of plane, sort of overlapping with this one. And so many of these 20 do overlap. In fact, it's probably possible to include all 20 of them in the one drawing. Um, and just think, wow, this is a strong scene. This really kind of connects with me in different ways. And yeah, uh, and I'm yeah, no, I'll leave that for now. So one contrast though that I want to single out, um, in its own point, so this is now point number 6, is value contrast. So by values, I mean lights and darks. So we have very strong darks, very black, either washes or hatching created by hatching, and very light areas side by side. It's just dramatic, and drama always grabs the eye, whether it's subject drama or sort of visual drama. And it grabs the eye, and so it concentrates attention on on the whole scene, but on certain parts of the scene. So our whole scene may be high contrast. I did a scene of a Yorkshire laneway, very heat of summer, sun overhead, very strong dark shadows and shaded areas. And so it's almost like a black and white cutout. You know those portraits that people do by cutting the silhouettes out of black cardboard. The scene is almost like that, only it creates a laneway that has depth rather than a portrait. Um, because that's what it does. And the whole drawing is like that because part of the impact is, wow, this is such a hot day and the cool areas are so cool and the bright areas are so bright and glary. And the only way I can really create strong light is to have the paper showing through. But it's the showing through in contrast to the dark areas that creates, well, brings meaning to what it is. Lets us see that this is, oh, trees and a pathway and a field in the distance and so forth under really strong light. And once we're at that level, then we're in the scene and we're engaging. And of course, this scene had a pathway. It had other elements to draw us in, and there was contrast between some quite large white areas with no ink on the paper and quite detailed area of silhouette edges of various trees and grasses and things. So, as I said, good composition brings a lot of these things together. And we don't necessarily have them in our photo when we take it. Some of them we might, but we won't necessarily. And the light and dark doesn't have to be like over the whole drawing. It doesn't have to be a whole scene of light and dark. It can be a part of the scene that actually focuses in to a certain part of our story, of our drawing, of our composition. And then from that point, we explore out or we move to another part. So it's manipulating all of these things. I'd love to hear where you're watching from. It's for me in Australia, it's 9 a.m., a few minutes after 9 a.m. What time is it where you are? I hope no one's watching me when you should be asleep. I hope it's not 3 a.m. for anyone, unless you've just come home from shift work or something and you're still winding down. Um, uh, okay, the next thing is I've called it grandeur. So this is Ray. G'day, Bergeron. 5 p.m. in Canada. Oh, that's very respectable, JC. I'm glad that works well for you. Maybe you can listen while you get your dinner ready. Grandeur is a good compositional element. Now, grandeur, 11 p.m. That's getting late for me. I'd like to be asleep by 11. Grandeur, it can be in man-made or a natural scene or a combination of the two, but it's simply an enormous and some sort of enormous vista of some type. Look, it could be in a grand central railway station. Doesn't have to be a palace. I don't know if anyone's ever seen inside Antwerp Central Railway. Sadly, I haven't been in it, but I've seen pictures from in there, and that's a beautiful, grand space. You know, the big New York Grand Central Station space, or it could be inside the Paris Opera House, um, the you know I guess I've shown this a few times now, but it's just here, this sort of grand interior space. Or it may be an outside view of a grand building. And it may combine the grand building with a dramatic angle, as we talked about in the very first compositional point. So all of that. Or it could be a natural grandeur scene. We could be on a cliff top looking at the coast as it moves away and perhaps sweeps around in a bay. I have a drawing I've done of just a small little drawing, but of a grand scene. Doesn't have to be a big drawing to capture grandeur of Robin Hood Bay. If anyone's ever been to Robin Hood Bay, let me know if you've been to Robin Hood Bay on the east coast of England. I don't know whether they'd call it the north east coast of England or the mid-east coast of England, but beautiful spot, so much to draw there, and certainly a grand view from the top, and just the view you get of the coast coming round. So yeah, but grandeur in itself is a strong compositional element, and it doesn't necessarily represent a grand subject. It's the viewpoint that's grand. We could be in a dense forest, but we're in a kind of a natural cavern that for whatever reason, maybe there's rock underneath, and so the big trees haven't been able to grow there, but whatever. So grandeur is an element that tends to grab our attention. Okay, the 8th point, framing. Framing is a strong compositional element because we're used to seeing things through frames. And so when we see a frame, we look to see what's in it. Now, the frame can come from many different ways. I mean, it could be almost literally like looking out a window. And so we could have the window framing around the outside, and we're looking through that. And so because we sense, oh, there's something to see through here, we look through there. So it plays just with our psychology a bit. But the framing may be from elements within. I've done a few drawings looking between columns of grand buildings, looking out or looking into the building, whichever way, between the columns, and the columns provide the framing. So the framing doesn't go all the way around the outside as a picture frame, but it serves the same purpose because it defines a space that we're looking through at something. What else have I got here? Sometimes, particularly if it's a very busy scene, the framing actually happens through negative space. It happens through where there's less detail that lets us, in a sense, focus inside that area of more white, of greater simplicity, lets us focus at the more complex things inside. So it lets us, so in what could be an overwhelming scene, this framing of less complexity lets us go, oh, okay, I can just engage with this part now, and that will be easier. That's manageable. I can do that without thinking and start to see what's happening here, as opposed to what I talked about earlier, where if the whole thing is very complex, the danger is that we bounce off it, that it's almost like a insect screen that actually obscures what's behind the overall effect of all that detail. So there's that as well. But I quite like framing, and it may be in a bush scene, a natural forest scene, where you've got some branches and tree trunks and things. Maybe at the bottom you've got grasses coming up that are very close and are a much closer depth of plane than the next depth of plane, and then the further one. So they, in the end, form a frame of sorts. Yeah. Okay, number 9. The 9th strong compositional element is figures that invite us to join with them in some way. It may be one figure, or it may be a group of figures. And again, you can see I touched on this when I talked earlier about that scene of the of the journey of the father and son going off for the day. Well, there were figures that invited us to join along with them, to join the party, to join the group, and to be a part of whatever exploration. And so now I'm looking ahead to see where they're going, because I'm going to go there too. Or maybe I wonder where they've come from and what I've seen with them, or at least what they've seen. Yeah, it may be a street with some people, and I feel like joining the group as they walk down the street, and I can see the sorts of things they're going to see, or maybe the things they're going to do. And in my mind, I'm imagining what that would be like. As I said, strong compositional elements in my mind are anything that draws us in and helps us to engage, or causes us to engage with what we've drawn. So without compositional elements, then someone can just walk past our scene without connecting with it at all, without seeing anything, or without even sensing anything worth stopping for to look at. And a drawing with strong compositional elements will make us want to stay, will make us want to linger and see and explore. Does anyone watching me at the moment, do you consciously consider composition, or is it more of a, oh, I like this, so I'll draw this? Is it a more generalized feeling? How many of you actually consider composition consciously when you draw, and even make adjustments to your photo, if you're drawing from a photo, to improve the composition? And I'm just wondering whether that's no, yeah, it's this isn't one of the 20 points. And I was just checking to see where it was on my list, but it's probably worth yes, a number one concern. Excellent, Jay. We want to make sure before we put all the effort into our drawing that it's worth drawing, that if it turns out it's going to be strong in every way possible. Because when I have a photo, I really need to consider how my translation of the photo into a drawing is going to work, and what compositional elements, the ones I'm talking about and ones I'm yet to talk about, will actually improve the composition. Because a photo has certain elements of composition built into it, but it's very weak on some things. Like, it's very weak on depth of plane. It's very weak on distinguishing between areas of a lot of detail and areas of less detail. Any detail that's there to be seen, whoop, the photo's grabbed it and it's there, and it all looks pretty much at the same level. And so that's a weakness of the photo, and it's a weakness that as an artist I can overcome by the way I translate the various parts, the various objects, and the various depths of plane that maybe they're not so obvious to see in the photo, but I can work out they're there because I can see what's happening. And therefore I can put the feel of that depth back into my composition, back into my drawing, and improve the overall composition. Yeah, Jay can see the need to add detail and add people for a focus. Yep. I Berkia, mostly I'm drawing things, leaves, flowers, birds, and so on. I've only been drawing for about a year. That's great. You don't need to have people in a scene to have good composition. I actually didn't put people in scenes for a long time because I couldn't draw them, or that's what I thought, or I thought they were somehow harder. And they do present some challenges, but in the end, we're drawing, and a lot of the distinction between easy and hard that we have in our mind is really just things I'm familiar with or unfamiliar with, or practiced with or unpracticed with in drawing, rather than really easy or hard. Or sometimes some things, because I'm not so interested in those things, I haven't observed them so carefully, and so I am less familiar, and that does make them harder to draw, but only because I haven't brought the same attention and experience to those sorts of things as I have to other subjects that I have drawn more frequently. So all of that as well. But yes, my streetscapes used to look like the zombie apocalypses had come and gone. There were no people, and in fact, there were no cars because I didn't like drawing cars either. I thought cars were too hard. So you can tell I'm not really. I've never been a car guy. But yeah, but with a photo, we can always improve it. We can add figures a bit closer so that we're more easily drawn in. And if you don't like drawing figures, draw the person walking away from you if you don't like faces, if you find faces intimidating. Sometimes a person whose back is to you walking away from you is more engaging. If a person's walking towards you, in a sense, you don't have to go to meet them, they're coming to you. But if you're looking at someone's back as they walk away, well, firstly, you don't know quite who they are, so there's a bit of mystery there. And are you going to fall in behind them and walk with them? And then you might want to peek around to see where they're walking. So there's perhaps more level of engagement with the back of a head walking away to draw us in, because they're actually going in the direction we want the viewer to go, which is further in, deeper in. Yeah. Usually I cheat and just look for photos on Reddit from photography subreddits. Yep, that's okay. But can you improve on the photo? And sometimes cropping will actually improve the image for a drawing, or it may actually improve the composition. Just because you have found a photo online, don't presume that the photographer has done the best crop. Have a look at it. Can you improve on it? Or is there just a part of this that will make a better drawing in terms of how you can manipulate the sorts of compositional elements, characteristics that we're talking about? A change was on there, but good enough for a base. Yeah. And that's what a good photo is. It's a good base. It's a good foundation. It's a good starting point. And now we improve on what is good and works well in the photo, and we minimize the weaknesses, the things that perhaps aren't working as well. Okay. You're a photographer as a profession, just don't travel much. Okay. Well, then you'd be very aware of compositional issues then, because you need them. And while there are some differences, obviously, in what you can create, the image you can create with a photo versus with a pen, there's a lot of overlap as well. So that's a good advantage in being someone drawing. Okay. I talked about complexity can be a good compositional element, but so can simplicity. So can a single thing that stands out boldly and clearly and with great emphasis, with great gravitas, that we cannot help but see and understand instantly, because there's nowhere to get lost. There's nowhere to be distracted from. And maybe, we have strong light. We have, we bring in a few of the other elements. Maybe the viewing point is a little bit not quite normal, a little bit down looking up, or top looking down, or whatever. But it's really the simplicity of the object itself, and or the simplicity of the surroundings, which grabs our attention. It's all about not letting someone's attention walk past our drawing. That there are compelling things in how we've drawn it that really pull people in. And so, yes, simplicity, ironically, can be a really strong compositional element. Would Google Street View be odd enough to strike originality? Do you mean legally? Because I think we would find that Street View is copyrighted, or do you mean just in terms of composition? I mean, I'm sure there's zillions of really drawable and worth drawing images you could snap out of Street View. I don't know where copyright goes, because an important thing to realize as an artist is that if you draw from someone's photograph without their permission, you've actually broken copyright, because their photo is their creative production. And even though you've drawn it, you've used their creative output in a significant way. Now, it's fine if you're doing this just for your own education, you're learning to draw and you want to have things to draw. But if you think, but really, if you're going to post it on social media, you should have their permission and credit their photography. As so, you look at my Instagram account and some of those really big, amazing drawings. Half the reason they're so amazing is the photography I started with was so amazing, and the photographers amongst you will hopefully be feeling pleased that I'm recognizing that, because it must be frustrating if you take an incredibly well composed photo and then everyone draws it, and it's like they made it up. They made up the composition, and you know how much you worked on the composition. So let's, as artists, we don't like people just, sticking our work on cards and tea towels without permission. Let's not do the same thing to photographers. As I said, not a problem for educational purposes, I don't think, just when you're learning to draw. The drawings that will stay, in the bottom drawer or in the sketchbook that you'll show people, oh, look what I did when, but once you think you're starting to get serious and you may want to do things with your images, you should start to find your own composition or have permission. And so, all the photographs on my Instagram account, I've got permission from the photographers, and I credit them in the notes. There's a couple that friends have taken, and I find whenever because I live in Australia, so we're a long way from anywhere, and except New Zealand, and and we and certainly down here on the sort of southeast coast where I am. So when family members travel, I get them to take photos that they think I can draw from, and then with a bit of tweaking and manipulation, I can enhance the composition often. So that's another way is to use people who will be happy for you to use their photos to take photos for you when they're in your places that you can't go. So a few ideas there about photography and copyright. Yeah, and you will avoid Yep, and see, it's the photographer, the photographer who's clearly on the side of the photographers. Yeah. So it really is worth having when you think you're going to start, maybe your drawings are good enough that maybe with the best of them you might do something with them. By that stage, you should have started taking your own photos or making sure you're drawing from photos where the photographer will give you permission to use their work, either acknowledged or unacknowledged. But you need to know, and they need to know, that you're potentially going to do that. Okay. As artists, we want people to honor our work. We need to honor the work of other artists, and that includes photographic artists. Okay. So let's move on. I'll just do a quick 10-second run through of the 10 points that you've missed if you've come in. Compositional elements with drawing that strengthen our drawings. The first one, an extreme viewpoint, looking down, looking up, really strong perspective. A very long depth of plane, because that draws us in some really close and really far things, and really creating the effect of distance is a very strong compositional element. Number 3, detail. You need to be careful. Too much detail can make us bounce off and not be able to actually connect with anything, but detail can be really effective. 4, an invitation to a journey in terms of the objects we have. So stairs, a street, a pathway that curves out of view, steps on a bush track, that sort of thing. Contrast of objects that create contrast of marks can create a lot of interest and make it easier to see each thing. I mean, so a tree next to a building, that makes the building makes the tree feel more like a tree. The tree makes the building look more architectural, and so they bounce off each other to increase the visual impact of each other. Yeah. Yeah, but we can also, number 6, have contrast of light and dark values, regardless of what they are, just strong lights and strong darks, and especially when they're close to each other. At some point, we want our blackest blacks next to our white of whites to create that really vibrant impact. Number 7, grandeur is a great compositional element. Now, that can be inside a big interior space like a central railway station, or it can be the outside of a palace. It can be a clifftop view. But some scenes in themselves, because of a sense of space and sometimes what's in the space as well, is majestic, overwhelming, grand, opulent, whatever. But a sense of grandeur in what we're drawing and how we're drawing it, and the scene, the viewpoint we create, is also a compelling composition element. Framing. Literally, we could be looking out a window frame at a scene. We're kind of triggered to look through frames. Thank you, darling. Have a good morning.
Okay.
My morning coffee. And my King Charles mug that my son brought back from the UK for me. I saw that you're in Mexico, Pacifica time. That's great, Vaughan. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Oh, that's good. Haven't had a coffee yet, and I've been up for 2.5 hours. Okay. Framing. It could be looking between trees. The framing doesn't have to be a formal frame, or they could be between two columns. Figures can be a very compelling compositional element because we can identify with people so readily. And if there's a group, we may want to almost join the group in the scene. Or if there's one person walking along, particularly if combined with things such as pathways and big grand scenes, we may want to join them and be with them or look to see where they're going. So figures can be helpful. And the last one was, the 10th one was simplicity. Can really grab attention because we can't help but see what the object is. There's no clutter to distract or to, what's the word, obfuscate, or something like that. Bergeron says, I used to carry around a small plastic frame as a photography student to look through. This was before digital photography was widespread. Yeah. Just to frame. And if we like to do location sketching, as a small frame can be helpful just to help us get a sense of what am I looking at. Now, of course, we can distort that when we draw it. We can distort the edges to have the scene sweep around us in our drawing if we want. But knowing what we're starting with is always a good starting point. Yeah, thanks for that, Bergerons. Okay, the 11th compositional element, I think, is a story scene where there is a story inherent in what we're drawing. So I did mention when on the journey one, that drawing of the father and son setting off on a day's walk together, that inherently brings us in. We want to know what's happening, what are they doing, who are they, where are they going. We might be wishing that we'd done a similar journey once, or we may just wish we could go with them in the scene. It might be a picnic scene and we want to sit down on the picnic with them. It may be a glorious park on a sunny day, and it may either bring back memories of being in that park if it's a famous park, or we may just think, oh man, I'd love to roll a rug out and just lie in the sun with those people. So anything that gets people slowing down and looking and thinking and partaking in some way with what we've created, what we've produced, is a good compositional element. Elements. Okay, number 12. this kind of overlaps with a lot of the others, but I thought it was worth expressing it as its own point. And that is, and if you haven't told me where you're watching from, I love to hear, please. And do you consciously address composition when you draw, or do you tend to just draw things you like without thinking about composition too much? I'd like to hear that too in the chat, please. Lets me feel like I'm not just talking to myself in my drawing room, which you can see behind me is very messy. And if you could see the front, here, let me show you. If you want to see where I produce, this is, yeah, it is such a mess at the moment, and it's getting annoying. There you go, little glimpse into my world. That's the glamour of an artist's world. Jay doesn't feel so bad. It's starting to irritate me though, because I'm starting to damage drawings and things that I don't want to get damaged because they're under so many layers, and then I put something heavy on top and it goes, everything gets a crease. So yeah, it's not really good. Okay, so to have elements, to include elements that literally draw the eye. Because what we want to do with composition is to stop people from going past our drawing, to bring them in and have them see things or experience things from what they see, and to be in some way caught up into the world of what we've created. And we may want to teach something. There may actually be a moral to our story. It may address an issue that may focus attention on an issue that we think is important, that people should be thinking about in some way. So there are all sorts of purposes we can have for our drawing, and the compositional elements should be reinforcing that. It may just be a happy scene that we want to draw because it made us happy, and we want other people to feel happy when they see it. It doesn't have to sort of solve world issues or right wrongs. It's up to us as the artist to have it. But once we, it is our responsibility to then create the artwork that achieves what's in our heart or our motivation in that moment. And so we want to use everything we can, every means we can, to grab attention, to put it in the place where it needs to be, to hold it there, and then to keep it in our scene, perhaps by moving it around to different parts and so forth. What we don't want to do is to do the, if you like, the anti-composition drawing, where there are elements that we've included or we've actually even highlighted in our drawing that either make it impossible to see and to engage, a bit like I mentioned earlier, so much detail that it's like a fly screen over a window and we're looking in from the outside, and there's just so much fly screen that you can't really see easily what's inside, and you really don't want to work that hard to work out what it is. So we don't want to have a scene with so much detail that it has that effect. We sort of go boing, and then we go on to the next drawing because that was just too hard work to look at. We don't want to do that. We want to create scenes that in some way we've seen, we've engaged, we've been drawn in and kept in without even choosing to, without even, like, whoa, look at this. And it may be because of impressive technicality, and that can be a strong compositional element that you do it well, but it's not necessarily just that. A beginner drawer who's still processing and working out those technical things can still have really strong composition, because there are a lot of strong compositional elements that even if our actual technical things have some issues, we can still benefit from the strong composition. Thanks, Gwiz. I'm not talking to myself. That's good. That's what I'm trying to draw now. A coffee shop in the colours from 40 years ago. I was actually, I wasn't even a young man 40 years ago. That's a bit alarming. After a year of drawing, I accept it to just draw for enjoy and drawing, know the finished work. It makes it easy to do with mistakes and choosing a topic. Yep, yep, yep. And nothing wrong with that. And sometimes I'll draw something because there is something I actually haven't overly considered. I mean, I feel like now I'm fairly intuitive with composition. If something grabs my attention and I want to put the time into drawing that, as opposed to all the other things I could draw, there's inherently going to be strong compositional elements because they grabbed me to the scene. Like, and this scene might be in real life or it might be in a photo, but the very fact that something said, "Oh, wow, draw this," meant there was something I could see that made me want to draw it. So there's a filtering process of good composition for I think certainly once we get to a certain point where the fact that we want to draw it as opposed to anything else means that compositionally it is strong. But if I can identify what those things are, I can strengthen them in my drawing and make my drawing as compelling, if not hopefully more compelling, than the photographic reference starting point was. Um, yeah, yeah, logical, but doesn't make it easy. Truly accepted. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. Number 13. This is simply the point that the strongest compositions have more than one element. It's not this or that, but it might have a lot of one and a bit of this one and a little bit of three more that work together well. And this is why I wanted to kind of talk through them rather than show through them. I'm actually thinking, what do you think of this idea? I'm actually thinking, because this is my morning, it's now 25 to 10 in the morning, but I'm thinking of going through my drawings and finding drawings that I've done that illustrate all of these elements, and then do a video where I repeat them, but I say, this can look like this can look like this. I think there's great benefit in just conceptually going through things because in the end, it's the understanding that we need. Now, seeing things can help us understand things. My concern when you show things all the time is that people just want to copy that one example rather than really taking in the concept behind and sitting with that enough so that they do understand it and can start to combine it with all the other thinking framework they've already got for drawing from what they've learned previously. Because, I think it's just because people in their learning today, and I can play the old man card here, that people in their learning today are so impatient. Everyone wants to get to the end now and find the shortcut, the bullet point list that will do that. And while in some ways it does teach us to see things illustrated, and therefore an example can be good, and I did consider that with this, but I didn't want to be holding up lots of things. While that can be good, it can also mean that we actually just see the one example and just want to like grab that and use it in a very heavy-handed, arbitrary copying way, almost like a cut and paste, because we haven't spent the time to think about what this is just conceptually first and understand it in a way that we can then apply it to other things, to other scenes, or we can find it in other scenes, recognize it in other scenes. And then we start to truly own the concept. And that's when we can actually start to truly use it, both for what we like to draw, for how we draw, for the materials we use when we draw, and so forth. Vaughan is drawing cats in graphite and going over the ink to keep them from smearing. Yeah. Listen, Vaughan, I've got a few videos on tips for pencil under drawings, like where you go over pencil in ink. My big drawings, like the one I showed earlier, my Instagram drawings, they're not freehand. They have a pencil under drawing. In fact, I have they're not freehand. I draw them with a 4x4 grid over the photo, and then on the paper to help me position everything quickly, accurately, because I didn't want to draw all the detail and then find that after 6 hours of detail that this angle doesn't fit with the angles above and below. But I did learn a lot about inking over pencil. And the big danger is that what you do is you put all the effort into the pencil and then you just trace over the top of the pencil. And what that's going to do is create, if I can be blunt, and I'm not saying you're doing it, you may not, but if I can be blunt, that can produce a very wooden, dead line, because it's not just about outlining a shape that's accurate. It's about creating a sense of 3-dimension and having life and movement and variation in our marks. And you might find that you put that into your pencil because, in a sense, that's when you're actually drawing as opposed to tracing. And then you trace over it and you sort of have less life in the traced lines because the concentration is keeping the pen on the pencil. And you may not even be looking at what your photo of the cat at that point. And that's deadly, I think. So yeah, if you want to find those videos, if you just search on my channel, I know, drawing from a photo, inking over pencil or something, there's only about 2 or 3 of them on this topic, but they're really important if that's what you do, because I think it in a sense, we can sadly, with the inking, go backwards in terms of the effectiveness of our drawing from the pencil, and then we erase the better drawing, the pencil drawing, if that makes sense. Compose. Look, I'll try to, but yeah, I need to be cautious about agreeing to things, because then I don't, and then I feel bad. I've got a long list of things I feel bad about. I get so many emails, and some of them I don't even get to reply to. And the annoying thing is, sometimes the ones I don't reply to straight away is because I want to think about them or I want to whatever, and then I just don't. There's too many. So sorry, but I'll see. Maybe I can. Look, it depends why we're going in pencil first. I mean, I think I had a good reason with my Instagram drawings. But if it's that I'm nervous or I'm scared of making mistakes and I can't erase them, if I want to have an ink drawing, I think it's really helpful to draw in ink. Like, yeah, there are challenges, but you will never, like, if I had never switched to freehand ink drawing, I've only been drawing freehand in ink since my YouTube channel. I decided I wanted to draw freehand in ink, and I began to make how to draw freehand in ink videos. Seems a bit presumptuous now. And I look back at my earliest drawings, and then I don't think they're as good in terms of what I was trying to achieve as the ones I draw now are. I think they're very limited in what they're trying to do because my understanding of the drawing process was more limited, and and because conceptually I was more limited, what I could do was more limited. I wasn't seeing all the possibilities of ink on paper and of drawing generally, not for me to create anyway. But therefore, as I began to draw, and I was happy enough with my first drawings to make videos about them, but I began to see more and then work out ways I could create that using a pen, using the fact that every mark is going to be there at the end. And what I learned was that it's partly kind of just mental. I was becoming perfectionistic with the ink over pencil, and I wanted to stop that as well. So not being able to erase anything kills perfectionism dead, or it stops you drawing, one of the two. And psychologically, you have to learn to accept that a drawing is a process. It's not a perfection at every moment. And the drawing's not finished, and you can't judge it till it's finished. And that a lot of marks that aren't, let's just say they're not in the place you meant to put them, that look like a disaster in the moment, by the end of the drawing, it's not a problem at all. So there's all these ways we change and we upskill when we're drawing straight in ink. I've got a couple of videos on that too, on drawing straight in ink and why it's helpful to. In fact, I've got a video maybe in the last 2 weeks about drawing, even last week, of drawing without an eraser. Why it's good to throw away the eraser. So yeah, I sort of developed that more in that. Tracing makes bad muscle memory. Yep, certainly can. Bergerons I use just making a few dots with the pen, so it's even if it stays there without drawing. Yep, and that's what I do, and I do positioning marks, and I do marks to help me visualize if this if this sort of comes out to here on the paper, does that look right proportion wise? I put a dot where I think this tree is going to stand next to what I've already drawn, and does that look about right? If I imagine the tree there where that dot is, no, actually the tree needs to be 5 millimeters to the left or to the right, and so I put another dot, and yeah, that feels better now that I look at the reference and my drawing again. And the dot that's out there on its own ain't going to be noticed at the end. So we learn to develop a technique to let us draw the way we draw and what we draw freehand directly in ink once we stop using the pencil. It also forces us to observe more carefully, because I can't think, with pencil, I would often think, oh, this will do. I'll check it and then I'll change it if it's not right. No, well, I can't do that now. So I need to observe more carefully the first time. I need to make sure I've learned the things that I need to see before even I put the dots on the paper, to help me just start to get a sense of where. And what I learned was, the more the drawing progresses, the easier it becomes, because I have all these reference points. So there's a tempo, there's a rhythm, that develop drawing just freehand in ink. Slow, cautious, careful, highly observant at the start, and as the drawing progresses, pick up pace, and it's faster, and we get more loose in our mark making and so forth. Okay. Best go. Yeah. Okay. 14th compositional element is a focus point. Now, with all of these, this doesn't have, sometimes a strong composition will be because it doesn't have this, but a strong focal point is usually a strong compositional element, a place where we're being directed to using some of the other sort of more technique driven elements, the values and the perspective angles, but a place where our viewing, our attention is focused in on, can be really helpful, because it lets us zoom in quickly and easily. It's almost a free ride, compositionally for us. And so sometimes it's the actual subject that does that. I mentioned earlier that simplicity can be a strong compositional element, because that, in a sense, necessitates a strong focal point, because there's sort of only the one thing to see, or there's only the one bit of detail to focus on. So, but it may be we create the focal point through more technique-driven means. So it may be with a bush scene. See, the problem with everything being such a mess is I can't lay my hands on anything quickly. I'm just trying to find a pad where I did some location sketching. I won't waste time looking. These are actually 2 prints, but they illustrate my point. The subtlety of the mark making isn't quite here, but this is a sort of a composition where there isn't really a focus point very clearly. I mean, there is this white tree that stands out because it is white and because um, there's more paper showing through. But this is the sort of detail where we can't penetrate it. This becomes like a fly screen of marks. We bounce off. There's a lot of depth in this bush, and whereas if we look here, I've got my closer, bolder elements more a focal point. So we've got between this and this, this is closer and it's darker. This is kind of stronger and has more gravitas. We do see clearly that this is in front of that because physically it's in front of that. But there's a much stronger sense of moving back into the distance here. And I was partly able to do that because I had the experience of seeing that this hadn't worked the day before, and therefore I knew I had to create, when I put all the marks on for the detail, still put it on, but I had to do it in a way that allowed the focus point to be clearer on certain things, which were these foreground elements. And there is this log down the front, which is at the very closest. So this scene, once we start to explore it, we tend to, I think, see this framing. We go into the depths and then we start to come back out. And when we come back out, we probably notice this log and the grass in front of it. So now we've even come further forward before we go back in and look at some of the other elements sort of that we might have, this tree and that we might have missed first time around. So we loop around a few bits. A few times. Whereas when it's harder to find a focal point, it's harder to engage. Is that helpful? Did you find that helpful? Okay. I'll try to find them. Just got some workable on its use, workable fixative. I've never used it. Yeah. I've only ever just the very few charcoal things I've done. I've sprayed them afterwards, but I've never actually. I've got some, but I've never actually used workable fixative. I think my other problem with drawing with pencil was I felt I was always smudging everything, and so I think better is to work a drawing technique where you're not smudging. Because it's probably that's the place you're at. Because when I know, and certainly with things like charcoal and graphite, smudging can be part of the technique, and that's great. It's unintentional smudging that's the problem. And I really think rather than trying to find ways to accommodate smudging, we need to learn not to smudge. We need to learn to keep our hand off the paper, or we need to learn to put a piece of paper on what we've drawn so that we can't smudge it. That's what I was doing with my pencil drawings. I don't know whether I've got a pencil drawing here that's going to be. I was doing these early Instagram drawings, and these were done with a 4x4 grid from photos that I took. And oh, did I take this? I don't want to say I took it if I didn't. Yeah, I think this book is all from my photos. Yeah, but I found smudging was a real problem, and so I just began to use a sheet of paper to avoid smudging. Bergeron says, I switch out a few A5 papers under his hand when I do the shading in pencil. Not always enough. Yeah, because if you still press on the paper, you can still smudge. So anyway, that's point number 15. Goodness. We better keep. Oh, I thought I'd get this in an hour. 15. Balance. And this is where, and honestly, probably most things, if you were to Google composition, the very first thing that would come up, almost certainly with AI, is balance. The way we place things to create balance visually in our space, whether it's a square or a rectangle, whatever shape, um, pleasing, harmonious proportions. And so this is where we talk about thirds and golden triangles and whatnot. But it's really just visually a harmonious balance in how things are placed, where the objects are and where the spaces are between the objects, things that let us engage in a calm and comfortable manner. Well, of course, we may want to engage with a hysterical and highly charged, emotional, frantic manner, in which case we won't go with the harmonious thirds and golden triangles. We'll break all those rules to create fear or panic, uncertainty, unease, whatever. These are all tools that we use for how we want our drawing to look and to function when people see it. Yeah. But generally, it works for most people most of the time to avoid things being dead center of our drawing. It works well to avoid significant things being too close to the edge, particularly on landscape orientations, because they can be uncomfortably close to the edge. We tend to start with the center or near center view, and then if we have to go so far to the side that we actually lose track of what we see in the center, and there's feels like this thing's going to be falling off the page, or there's not enough space on one side to feel like it's comfortably sort of framed, that it's securely in our scene. It literally becomes a little uncomfortable having to go there and to see it out on its own over there. And so having a bit more space, having something comfortably in the left-hand third or the right-hand third, like in the center of the left-hand third, in the center of the right-hand third, or off-center. And of course, the thirds are horizontal and vertical as well. So all of that. And of course, with photos, this is where we crop. As we zoom in and we change the proportions, we change where things are relative to each other, but also relative to the outside border. So when we crop, we can crop to advantage, or we can crop to disadvantage if we're not careful. So just to be aware of that. 16, good composition will conjure emotion in some way. It doesn't have to be, the emotion can just be a sense of relaxation because our scene is very harmonious. Or it could be, as I just said before, panic and uncertainty because of what we've drawn and how we've drawn it and how we've positioned it, and the marks we've used and the angles we've formed all make us go, if that's what we want to do, then that's successful. But conjuring emotion. I think I've kind of said that. Number 17, complexity. I talked about detail, but that's not the same as complexity in itself. So, this I think is more complexity. Although there is detail in it, it's a complex scene of many depths of plane. This drawing that I drew yesterday in yesterday's video, that's a complex scene. I mean, that took me more time to draw than most buildings that I draw because of the complexity of it. Not that my drawing was necessarily as complex, but I had to navigate the complexity and the choices. But at least in parts, that shows in I don't know where that drawing finished up. I would have thought it was just on top some here. Oh, I know it's here. If you could look at the video. Where is it? I'm sure it's in this. Yep, here it is. So this is how that one looked. And so you can see what I've done compositionally. Um, this tree is a little bit on center. I would have preferred it just slightly. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, yeah. Anyway, but these two long, skinny trees sort of frame it, and they're comfortably off to the side. But there's enough room here to kind of see, be able to look past without feel like we're to look past this space, look past this tree through here, without feeling like we're going to fall out of the drawing when we do it. I think that's what I mean when I'm talking, compositionally about this. There's visually there's room to look around on the skinny side of the scene without feeling like we end up out here and we've left the drawing. Um, with depth of plane, we've got really close things down the front. So we've got some really close, strong grasses. That's where our depth of plane starts. It starts with the closest thing. Even if we don't notice the closest thing immediately, it is where the depth of plane starts. And at some point, if we go back far, we'll probably come forward and then come down and see down here. We rush to the focus because, see, this isn't a focus. The focus isn't necessarily the closest things, but we do get there in the end. And the sense of the depths of plane that move backwards, and then we have what's behind these trees, and we have these trees in the foreground, trees in the midground. We have um, uh, trees, hints of trees in the distance, and then we have the hatching for the foliage of the trees in the distance. So, you know, this is where we have um, complexity in the scene itself, that compositionally, as long as we create enough focus. And so if you so this was the translation of this. Now I took this photo, so I knew what this scene looked like in real life, and that was an advantage because it helped me have a sense of space and of how it, there's a few things I'm not happy about with the drawing, but that's what drawing's about. It gives me a focus for the next drawing such as that. And what I should do is either redraw that, or probably from my point of view, better still, when I go for a walk today, take a similar but different scene and try and overcome what I think of as the weaknesses of that. Because I'll start with the knowledge, with the experience of that. Jay's got, just look at it, and if it gets dirty, just switch. Yep. That's the paper over the graphite. Emotion is what I'm going for in my composition. Yep, emotion's great. G'day, Better Cat. Hello there. Where are you watching from? Okay, so point 18 is a new view of a familiar subject. And again, this can combine possibly with an extreme viewpoint. I did a drawing of Sacre-Cœur on Montmartre that was taken by this pair of great photographers who were doing drone photography before I knew of anyone else doing world photography. Their Instagram account is World Walkers with a Z. And yeah, it was that they sent a drone up high over Sacre-Cœur, looking down, and it looks very different from the top down, because not just is it so tall that you're always looking up at it from the ground, but it's on the top of a hill. And so we're also used to seeing it as we walk up. And sometimes you get zoomed shots level from other high points in Paris, particularly the top of the Montparnasse Tower. But this was different looking down. And I love that. I love the fact that it's a familiar subject. We know straight away what it is, but it's, wow, I've never seen it looking like this before. But it can be my Instagram drawing that by far has done best in terms of views is from a photo by Christophe Buiron. of a famous arch in Rouen, and it's got a big clock in it, and over really a laneway. It's not really a street, but it's a Renaissance or maybe even a bit earlier structure, and we're at the street level, but we're looking up. So yeah, the clock is greatly foreshortened, and it's a very arresting scene. And unless you've actually walked under it and looked up, it's not the sort of view you would get. And so, very strong composition for all sorts of reasons. But this unfamiliar view, extreme view, and yeah, it's that's the drawing that's grabbed most attention of the hundreds I've put on Instagram. That's the composition that has worked best. Yeah. 19. I've got variation. Oh yeah. I touched on this when maybe actually I touched on this when I was contrast of forms. It kind of overlaps, but it's having different things that again create different spaces that we can navigate that help in a sense. It's sort of divide and conquer. Um, Different elements, either the subject, the values, or the maybe the edges, um, that differentiate various parts that help the engagement process work more easily. Please hit that like button if you haven't already. I should have said that before. And look, the final 120, this one maybe is a bit hit and miss, but a good composition can evoke memories. We don't have to have been in the place of this composition to have memories evoked of something similar that we've been in. I mean, it may evoke future memories. It may make us want to go somewhere and do something. But this picnic scene may remind us of another picnic scene, or of what our picnic scenes were like, or maybe what they were not like. Maybe a composition can unfortunately evoke not so helpful memories. But as I said, I think what I'm going to do after these 20 is I'll actually make a video today where where I can go through all my drawings and pull out drawings that demonstrate what I'm talking about, to now illustrate with pictures. But I think it is really important and helpful to talk conceptually about these things, because as I said early on in this discussion, the problem with showing a picture straight off to illustrate it is it becomes very kind of click, okay, that's how this looks. And we do live in a bit of a cut and paste. No one wants to write a document anymore. We want to cut and paste paragraphs and, in a sense, assemble something without really creating it, without having to work it out ourselves. And I don't think this mindset works well. Well, I don't think it works well for writing. As a former English teacher, I certainly don't think it works well for writing. And we don't develop the skills we need. And if we want to be able to make good compositional choices when we draw, we have to understand conceptually the possibilities and how they might be created. And then we, in a given scene, we can start to work out which ones are relevant and how might I use them. As I said, I actually don't consciously anymore think about composition. I find that it has become very intuitive. In fact, I can't stop composing. I'm in the car looking, and it's like I've got that little plastic frame to hold up with everything I see. Everything I see, I analyze in terms of a drawing. Even in the backyard when I'm weeding the garden, or whatever. Let alone when I'm somewhere with great scenes. Because in fact, good composition will make what to someone else might have been the most mundane, everyday, uninteresting scene life-changing, really compelling. Something that you can't not look at and get drawn into because of the way it's presented. Composition is all about how we're presenting what if I lean really forward, I'm like this. Composition is all about the way we're presenting our subject so that we get engagement. It's like the difference between this and this, which composition is more engaging? Yeah. So, yeah, composition. If it's not something we think about, it's worth starting to think about. And I think we are better off just thinking of it conceptually and then looking for that in what we see and then working out how can we introduce this into something we have where we can't see these elements at this point in the scene, but how can I bring it in to strengthen the composition? Mark my words, any drawing you think is a great drawing, if you go back with these 20 elements of strong composition, you will find 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them all at work in this one scene. And of course, the actual drawing will be well done too. There will be finesse and control and accuracy in the mark making. And by accuracy, I also mean in deliberate distortion, because that requires accuracy so that the deliberateness is also a part of it and we can relax with it as well. You will find so many of these in it. That's great. That's great, Jay. If this is the first of my live sessions you've come across, I do have others, and so there is a playlist for live sessions. So please hit the like button for me, and you can put some of those other live sessions on in the background. When some of them are quite long, some of them are, I think one of them's 2.5 hours, but mostly in between. But yeah, put them on while you're working in the garden or cleaning the kitchen, whatever, doing the ironing, whatever you do, or you can put them on your TV screen. But they're really mostly more to listen to than to watch. As I said, holding things up here isn't a great sort of way to do that. I'm better off doing that if I want to show something by making a video. So I think I will make a video on composition today. Maybe I'll bring this down to maybe 15 points, and I will have examples of my drawing. So look out for that in about 8 hours time. But yeah, are there any final questions just quickly before I go? Yeah, okay, thanks. I've done a few more lately. Yeah, I've had long COVID for a few years now. So, but the last month or so, I've been feeling a lot improved, and so I've been kind of getting back into doing these because I do enjoy them. Australian time zones aren't great for most of the world, unfortunately, but that's how it is. I love living here. So any other questions before I go? This is your chance to ask me a question about drawing. Any problems that you're having, or something if you're wondering whether I have a video on? I think I have close to 1,400 videos, so that can be a bit overwhelming. And of course, they deal at all levels. So some of them are really very beginner levels, and some of them are quite advanced. But even if you're at beginner level, I can see a lot of value in looking at advanced things, as long as you don't set yourself up to think, oh, I can do that now because I've seen the video. Because no, you probably can't. But it gives you an indication of the direction to take your thinking, or where the possibilities exist in the future for you to go. And that can help you in the present position yourself by starting to move in the right direction, or to be aware of the right direction. It may help you see perhaps bad habits, well, not bad, but just habits that aren't going to take you to where you want to go. So for instance, if you want to draw in ink, don't draw in pencil. Pencil's a fantastic drawing medium. Graphite's so flexible, so much you can do. It's so responding to touch and pressure and movement. It's just wonderful. But if what you want to do is to learn to draw in ink, pencil won't take you there. It's a different medium. It's like if you want to learn watercolor, don't start in oils. if you want to paint in oils, don't start in watercolor. Start in the thing you want to get good at. So, yeah. Now, where did that come from? I don't know. Well, there aren't any more questions. Absolute last chance. 10 seconds to pop a question on the screen. Otherwise, I might go for a walk in the what's today going to be like where I live. Today is a high of 26 degrees. It's 21 degrees now. So that's probably a nice temperature for a walk. Of course, in Australia, we're coming into it's November, so we're coming into summer. Summer officially starts for us on the 1st of December. We align our seasons with the 1st of the month, not with the equinoxes or those things, solstices and equinoxes. But yeah, thank you for joining. Yeah, if this is the first video you've watched, first live session, please check the playlist out, or look at some of the videos I've produced the last few days. So all the best with composition. It's worth thinking about. It's such a shame when a drawing works out really well and sadly it has compositional problems, because at that stage we can't overcome them. So it's worth working on our composition, worth, when we finish a drawing, not just asking how could I have made it better technically, but how could I have made it a better scene to look at? You know, maybe these parts could have been darker. Maybe this tree should have been further to the left. Maybe if I was down more looking upwards, and if I took the photo, then that gives me information for the next photo I take. Try and get a more dramatic perspective angle when I take the photo, and that will help me create a better drawing. Whatever is part of my personal drawing process, I want to be critiquing. And if I primarily draw from my photos, then taking better photos is part of how I will improve my drawing. It's not just about the technicalities of hatching and whatnot, but it's all the elements. And the composition is a really important one of the finished drawing. So hope this has been helpful. Why not try consciously put some of them into practice, review some of your previous drawings and think, having heard those 20 or however many you heard, how might I have improved this? Can I see a weakness in the composition now, or a strength opportunity that I didn't take that will inform me for my next drawing? It's not about judging and finding ourselves having failed in the past. It's about, how do I do better in the next one? And that's why we should always analyze our drawing for weaknesses, not to beat ourselves up, but to make our next drawing shine even more. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Hope you found this helpful. Hope you go off and do some drawing now, or at least look at some of your drawings and think about what we've talked about in relation to that. But whatever you do, whatever you draw, however it turns out, whatever the composition's like, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.